All right, welcome to School Facilities and Operations. I am Burke Jones. I'm a operations guy in a K-12 district in Kansas. So deal with facilities every day in my job. And on the podcast, we have two kinds of conversations. One, I bring a guest on that has a similar position to me, and we just talk about what's going on in their district, what their challenges are, what's going on in their life. And then the other kind is I bring a trade partner on and really kind of do a deep dive to get some questions answered that I have, which I assume a lot of other people would have the same kinds of questions. So that's what we have today on today's episode. I have Jereme Nollett from McCowan Gordon Construction, and we are going to be talking about commissioning. And so, I've heard about commissioning for a long time, but I still have a lot of questions. And so I thought it'd be a great topic to get some more information on and really get a better understanding on how it can benefit us. So welcome, Jereme.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to come on here and speak to you about it. We appreciate it.
Sure. So give us a little background on, how you've come up to this position, and then share with us something that's more personal about yourself, like that we wouldn't normally read about if we were looking at LinkedIn or something.
Okay. Yeah. How I got here, I went to Kansas State University and graduated with architectural engineering. Career's kind of been split between the design world and the commissioning world. Graduating in 2007, the economy kind of went back and forth there a little bit. So that's kind of how I cut my teeth in on the commissioning side. I have a unique perspective from sitting on the design world to being able to test other people's designs. So now here I am at McCowan Gordon leading the commissioning team. Facts about me, I really love getting into sports, the housing remodels. I'm always working on my house and continuously updating it. And, I'm on house number 2 here. I really did enjoy brewing some beer. So I've got a Oktoberfest sitting in my beer fridge lagering currently. And, it's been a fun hobby that I can really apply some of, my nerdiness with the controls and how it's done and the process. And, so it's a lot of fun.
Well, when's that going to be ready? I'm just going to plan my trip, to Kansas City.
Yeah, so it's in the lagering phase now. It's been fermented, and so I probably have another couple of weeks here until it's ready that I can put it into the keg and start carbonating it. So
very cool. Well, you went to the right school too.
It was
K-State alum.
Yeah, I learned a lot. It prepared me very well.
Yeah, well, sounds good. So let's dive into this commissioning. So I guess let's just start with kind of what the definition is, or in the big picture, what commissioning does. What do you do when you commission something?
Okay. So at a high level, commissioning is a systematic process to ensure that the design intent is met and that the facility or the building systems operate the way that they're supposed to or intended. So you can get in there and the building may or may not, controls vendors go in, they, forest through the trees, they're programming everything, they're trying to make all the pieces and parts work, and, things get missed. We're all human. So it's a process to ensure, it's a quality control process to make sure that it's installed and operating the way that it should.
Okay. So basically you take what the design engineer's intent was and then make sure that it's actually performing that way.
Yeah. And it also, depending on when you start, if it's a lead project, it could start all the way at the very beginning with the owner, when you establish an owner's project requirements, and then you bring in the design team. So commissioning is really a thread, if you have the full breadth of the scope, to take you from conception all the way through turnover and handoff. So when you as the owner are there through the whole thing, you have the design team, and then it turns over to the construction side, and then it turns over to the owner. We can be that voice and that thread to make sure that your criteria is met.
Okay. So I know there's a couple different, you could be talking about brand new construction or a building that's 20 years old or whatever. So let's talk about new construction. And I would just say a typical school project. So
Mhm.
not lead, probably. What would be the best practices if we wanted to work with a commissioning, I guess, agent or company through that thing?
Yeah, to me, it's get somebody that you know, like, and trust. If you get somebody you know, like, and trust, they're going to be out for your best interests. A lot of it is a business, but it's got to work for everybody. So if you have somebody like, and trust, it makes the process work really well. That they have your best interest in mind. So whether that's a third party or whether that's part of a GC, or if you have somebody like that, to me that goes a long way. That's find somebody with personal integrity that you really enjoy working with. But as the procurement kind of goes on, it really, you can customize your scope. You can customize kind of what you want to fit your budget. You can start with lead and you go with the OPR commissioning plan. It's a really defined process. To some schools, if they have a limited budget, we'll narrow it down to a kickoff meeting and just functional performance testing, and we give an issues log. And it's really just putting it through its paces. Anything can be customized to meet your needs. Oop, I lost your audio.
Do you have me now?
Yes, I got you now.
Okay. Well, we had a minor difficulty where my audio was out. So if you were working like during the design phase, like what does that look like? Are you giving feedback to the design engineer based on what we all decided was kind of our goals with this project?
Yeah, so it makes sure that we align with what your goals are, what your energy goals are, what I mean, sometimes what you guys want for a sequence of operations. If you want to spread that across the board, you have a standard. We make sure that it's adhered to that, but we really look at it from a commissionability standpoint and maintainability.
Okay.
So how easy is it to test? How it's coordinating sometimes a lot of the pieces and parts, getting the controls vendor and the manufacturer in the same room if it's being integrated, and kind of making sure the left hand's talking to the right hand to avoid it down the line.
Okay. So hopefully no one laughs at me when I ask this question, but what do you mean by sequence of operation?
Okay, so every mechanical piece of equipment, an air handler, chilled water system, there's a control system of some sort, whether you have a central control system or it's unitary to that piece of equipment.
Okay.
How that equipment is programmed to operate is the sequence of operation.
Okay. And so that's normally standardized, or like, I know
Yes.
we have that because we have a control system, but I don't know, I guess wasn't sure how standardized it was.
So a lot of school districts don't necessarily have it standardized. Some do. We just went through an exercise where, we got commissioning on it, and the design engineer had a sequence of operations, but what the controls vendor put in didn't match. So we wrote all our sequence or all of our functional tests to match what the design engineer had, but the submittal was a copy and paste out of that. But what they actually implemented was different. And
Okay.
what had happened was that controls vendor is used by that district all throughout, and they put in what the district standard was, but nothing was documented. So we went through that exercise to really document it and establish it. So moving forward, when they go to a design engineer, it's here are our sequence of operations. So that way everything matches across the board.
Okay. So then, like, during the construction process, what does your involvement look like?
Okay, so a lot of that, it's early on in the construction process. It's making sure we're integrated into the schedule. That's kind of the big one. But then there tends to be somewhat of a lull, if you will. We'll come out and do spot checks. We'll walk the site. Go through when the contractors go to install the equipment and start it up. We like to be there for some of the startups. When the equipment starts to go in, if part of the scope you have pre-functional checklists, we're facilitating that, making sure that the subs and everybody is checking those off. Is the electrical connections there? Where's the controls? It's a install checklist, really.
Okay.
And then we'll have we'll carry on from there to test and balance will occur. Once that all happens, we have the test and balance report, then we come in and we do that functional testing and everything that's out there. So we work with the subs and put it all through its paces, make sure it's there. And we develop an issues log or deficiency log. There's 100 names for it.
Right.
And we help track those to resolution, and so that's kind of as we get through that construction phase.
So what would some issues look like? Like what would be issues?
Yeah, so some of them are as simple as trying to think like a lead lag sequence on a humidifier for an air handler. This was one that came up yesterday where we failed a humidifier came up, it acted the way it was supposed to, but when you fail a humidifier, they had redundant ones. The second one was supposed to pick up. It didn't pick up. So there was an issue with that one. Another one was this particular unit was supposed to have a dehumidification mode where the relative humidity coming back in the return air was high, then it would change the discharge air temperature to wring some of that water moisture out of the air. Right. It didn't incrementally change that discharge air temperature the way it was supposed to. So by identifying this, it allows the controls vendor to go in and correct that to get you what you guys wanted to have and what the design engineer had prescribed.
So having just recently opened several buildings, those are issues we've had. Yeah. That, we had to research and figure out and discover where they could have been headed off right when the building was opening instead of 9 months later. So okay, because we discover it when the papers start curling on people's desk. I think there's a humidity problem in this room.
Yes, exactly. It helps with that occupant comfort, and then works with your maintenance team. So on the back end from construction side, you have the turnover and all that. So you may have training as part of your scope that trains your staff to know how to use it. Validating, you may have a warranty phase where we come back at 11 months, or deferred testing to say we do it in the middle of June or July. We may come back in the winter and, test your heating as opposed to completely faking it out, making it think it's 40 degrees outside.
Right. Yeah. So, I can see a lot of value in this. What kind of, what's a price range for that kind of, I know there's lots of probably scope options and everything else, but what would be a typical range for something like that?
Yeah. So like you said, depending on documentation, what scope you choose, a good range for a school, is 75 cents to $1 a square foot. The dollar would be more if you have a lab, something like that. Depends on the intensity of it, where 75 cents for a typical school is probably pretty fair, assuming you have a pretty full scope, pretty close to lead. So, depending on what options you have, it can get a little bit lower.
Okay. I'm just doing the mental math in my head. It's a chunk of money, but to be assured it's going to work right when you open, and then kind of have all of that documentation of how it was supposed to work, and how, if we need to fall back and relook at something, my guys would have all that in hand. I think that could be really money well spent, I think.
Yeah. Well, and there's also a return, which I'm sure we'll get to with retro commissioning. It's easier to see, but you have all the documentation, as you said, but you have a utility spend that if it wasn't operating correctly, it's probably using more electricity and that kind of stuff. Maintenance side of it, if you're hammering those compressors more than you really need to, it's probably going to have a premature failure. So down the line, you're going to have more spend. So it's kind of where do you shift that money kind of thing. And so it tends to have a pretty quick payback, usually 2 to 5 years, I think is kind of the average, depending on the building systems. There's always those caveats.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because the engineer designs this thing, the contractors put it in, hook everything up, turn it on, the engineer walks through and be like, yeah, it's you can't see much on a walkthrough, right? It's blowing air.
Yep. Yep.
It's been tested, it's been balanced and all that. But there's all that other stuff that went into, that happened before the switch was flipped that no one
Mhm.
double checks. So I think it's a very interesting thought process, I think, for me to think about for the next time we do new buildings.
Yeah.
So let's talk about retro commissioning, because this is one that I think I've talked to a couple other guys in my position where they've done this. And they had significant results from it. So let's talk about that, because that's what most of us have. We have, 10 to 50, 60, 70-year-old buildings. And, I know like our HVAC techs, they go in and they tweak things here and tweak things there. And I can only imagine after 20 years,
Mhm.
that system's
Yep.
probably not running anything like it was designed.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So retro commissioning or existing building commissioning, those terms can be interchangeable depending, it's another systematic process to go through and ensure that the systems are working the way that they're supposed to. But a lot of times it's more along the lines of, hey, my utility bills are really high, or occupant comfort. You have humidity issues, or there's just something going on with there, and it's going in either, can be looked at many different ways. So solving occupant comfort issues and reducing utility spend are the big ones. And
Right.
this is my personal favorite type of commissioning. It's, you get to go in and it allows me to use the engineering side of me and problem solve on a different way. You go and you test all the equipment, you do a point to point to make sure that the sensors are calibrated, that when it says the fan's enabled, did it enable, that kind of stuff. But then you're
Right.
also looking at different things that you can change or implement that would save energy.
Okay.
Technology is always changing. You used to put in big, squirrel cage fans and things, and now you have fan walls. They're way more efficient. It's more even air distribution. Anyway, there's a savings in there. But even adjusting like a sequence of operations of my discharge air on a VAV system has a duct static. Instead of just a hard set number, you can make that change based on what the spaces are calling for. That saves motor horsepower, that saves, compressors and things like that. So, you put the system through its paces and you start identifying these things that you can change, and you start to calculate each measure that we call. You have ECMs, FIMs, and EEMs. So an ECM is energy conservation measure. Those tend to have somewhat of a impact on the tenants or the occupants. You have an FIM is facility improvement measure, that it may not save energy or have a return on investment that way, but it may as far as your maintenance staff. And
Okay.
then EEMs is energy efficiency measure that won't have an impact for say on the occupant, but it saves energy on the operation.
Okay.
So, and in the end, we package all this stuff together and we provide a report and kind of come back with you on what you would like to implement.
Okay. So then we get the report, but then you would work to help us get that implemented, either working with the controls guys or
Mhm.
working with our guys to get new equipment or new
Yep.
fans or whatever. Okay.
Yep. And I skipped some steps in there. If you have the occupant comfort issues, we may interview your staff. We may look at your maintenance records. There's a whole, there's the investigation part of it, but then there's the whole data collection and really formulating a game plan to go and do all that testing, and then we pull the analysis. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Does it ever, like, to do some of that testing, do you have to have it like accurately balanced?
So when we go through and do the testing or the interviews and stuff, it's good to have it accurately balanced, but it tends to show itself. So if you have humidity issues, a lot of times your outside air may not be correct, or there are things that tend to show that, hey, this isn't balanced well, and a lot of times that is a recommendation.
Okay. So, can you do that like on I don't know, a wing of a building? Like if I have a problem area of the building, can we identify those units and say, let's see what's going on here?
Yeah, you can do some targeted commissioning, and yes, most definitely.
Okay. So how much does that usually cost? That's the
So
$100,000 question every time.
right. So it really, again, comes back to scope and what you want included. On average, it's anywhere, we probably land 30 to 50 cents a square foot, depending on
Okay.
scope, just to get you, that gets you all the way to that report and that phase. As far as the implementation, we tend to run that as a separate contract because you don't know what you're going to
I
find.
don't, yeah, yeah. Because it might be a couple year implementation or a few year if we're trying just to do it out of, capital outlay or something like that. So,
Yeah.
okay.
And when we turn that over, we try to lay things out or have that conversation with you up front of, hey, what's your simple payback that you're looking to do? So some of them might be a 2-year payback, some might be 6 months. You might look out to 5 years, that kind of thing. Or we may lump some of them together to make it so this package has a total payback for what you're looking for.
Yeah. Do you think there's an age of equipment that it's not beneficial for? I mean, we have a lot of equipment, and probably every school district does, that's like right at the edge of, their lifespan. Does that make sense to?
It kind of depends on your budget, your appetite for it, because there's a lot of times you can go in and maybe you have a great maintenance staff and it's a matter of changing out compressors, or it depends on, I would look at the maintenance logs and see what's happened with that unit, and
Right.
sometimes it's worth swapping the whole unit out, and other times it's worth just making some of those corrections on pieces and parts, and
Okay. That makes
or
sense.
hey, take out that old fan and put a fan wall in if it makes sense, and then that part's good. It depends on the equipment, to answer your question.
Right. What's that term you used? A fan what?
A fan wall.
A fan wall. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
I know what
instead
you're
of
talking about.
one big fan, it might have 4 fans that move the air and work in concert together.
Okay. 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 So we've talked about new building. We've talked about retro. I think there was another one we talked about a little bit and I didn't totally grasp it. So let's talk
Okay.
about that.
Yeah, so there's monitoring based commissioning. It's also continuous commissioning, but that's been copyrighted, or that's the term I'm looking for, by Texas A&M. So there are a few names out there for it. We call it monitoring based commissioning.
You
And
better trademark that one.
right, that's what they've done with the with continuous commissioning. Thank you.
Or copyrighted or whatever it's called.
Yeah. So where new building, it's different than new building and retro commissioning, whereas those tend to be a little bit more snapshot in time. With new building, you're putting it through its paces, but you're putting it through full cooling, full heating, and it's this brief moment, if you will, a week, depending on how big it is. Retro commissioning is kind of the same way. We tend to look at trends, so that opens that window up a little bit more, where monitoring based commissioning is you're applying, some rules, some fault detection, maybe some analytics, and you're looking at it through its day to day. So, with the analytics, you're kind of looking at, how often is this air handler kicking on and off? Is there some improvements we can make? But it's continuously watching your system. So a simple example I like to go with is, I got a VAV box. I'm calling for heating. The discharge air temperature says it's 70 degrees. Well, that's outside of the range that we would expect. So then it would, notify that there is a fault that's been detected, so you can get ahead of things early. So it's continuously watching that. So instead of, somebody making a phone call to you, you've got a flag ahead of time and you can try to, be a little bit more proactive in things.
Okay. So what would like your involvement being something like that?
So another one of those that depends on your scope. So what we try to do is set it up to, we'll come in and we will establish, the rules or the software package that has to be put onto that. And then depending on the scope of work with it, we can go through and we can provide monthly reports, or, kind of go through those faults and have meetings with you to turn over what our findings are with some recommendations. And really, we just kind of watch that over, for anywhere from a year to 3 years is kind of where we try to tie things in and, be able to make recommendations for improvements and identify things that aren't working properly or, starting, potentially beginning to have
Right.
issues.
So is that typically a separate software and controls, sensor package than what our controls package is?
Yes, it depends on the controls vendor. Here in Kansas City, we're partnering with some controls vendors to essentially have a bolt-on package that they put with theirs. And so it can
Okay.
be a part of that, or it can be a third party that we overlay with it. So, if we have an analytics package, we might use a SkySpark, which will overlay the control system. So
Okay.
most of the time, it tends to be an add-on that's integrated.
Right. So are you seeing like a lot more, I'll say school districts specifically, working with someone to commission their systems than they used to?
Yeah, I definitely am. The scopes are being a little bit dialed in. We'll have some of them that go back to that functional testing only, and some that, depending on what it is. A lot of universities, you see more residence halls, they, want to have it LEED certified, so we'll have
Right.
that scope of it. But yeah, from a QA/QC standpoint, we're seeing a lot of schools because it's eliminating some of that headache or removing some of the headache and, setting that building up to a smoother turnover and transition.
Yeah. I think that's what amazed me because I was an architect before this. And so, we used to finish a building and like, oh, it's done. And then from the owner's side, you're like, oh my gosh, like we have to move everybody into this building right out, and then we have to, establish the culture and deal with all of the new equipment and controls. And it's a huge job as an owner to open a new building. So I think, having that commissioning side, man, we know it's working, it's going to go smooth. No one's going to be hot on the first day. That would be a huge load off of guys like me, I feel like. So
Yeah.
I think it sounds super cool. There's some buildings here I love to look at, either, a whole building retro commissioning or just some targeted areas where we know we have people aren't comfortable on a regular basis,
Mhm.
so that might be in my future. So
Very
anything
good.
else you want to cover off on commissioning?
Oh man, I could go on this for days, so I might end up putting you to sleep. So
Do you have any successes? You don't have to name names, but you have any, like, something that just stands out, like, we were able to do this for somebody?
Yeah. Man. Okay. So one of the more recent ones that was a new building commissioning was, it was a pretty large building. They had 20 air handlers, something like that, with, each unit, probably had 100 VAV boxes off of it, just massive
Wow.
building. Well, they had, an outside air plenum that tied into these ERUs, which then that fed to one or two air handlers. And we were having an issue where that outside air coming in was just really shaking or oil canning that ductwork,
Oh,
and it was really loud. We were trying to solve the problem. It was going all the way down through the air handler, and you could tell it in the space. And the manufacturer got involved, and we were troubleshooting this. And myself and another guy in our office, we, as the manufacturer's doing their thing, we went and did some additional testing on it. And what ended up solving the problem was on the ERUs that outside air that comes in, it had a damper that opened from the top first. And then, as that opened, the fan was base mounted at the bottom and then went through the unit. Well, as that opened up, it stopped, 3/4 of the way to get the amount of air it needed. It's creating enough turbulence with that fan that it was just causing that to shake. And
wow.
we had run tests, various different things that we thought it could be, and tried it out. And, we tried just adding a little more static pressure on the inlet side of that fan by modulating that damper. And long story short, that didn't solve completely the problem, but it showed that it reduced it significantly. So, we went back with the mechanical. They ended up flipping those dampers to allow the air to come in, and it opens from the bottom, and it completely solved the problem. So it was
Wow.
one of those really fun ones that, it's kind of like, you walk away from that one with a little more pep in your step,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Makes all that engineering science pay off right there.
Yeah. And another one to go with the retro side was one of the counties here. We did some work there experiencing some high utilities, and we had benchmarked it with Energy Star. And, it was supposed to be a 50, and they were blowing that out of the water by 20 some points. And we went through, did the full retro commissioning and point to point, and they selected what measures that they had wanted. And we ended up beating Energy Star by 5 or 6 points. So we brought them down within range and surpassed it to where now they're, seeing a lot of utility savings. And
Wow.
we identified one of their handlers had 7 compressors, and we found out 5 of the 7 weren't working. So
Wow.
yeah, so that was occupant comfort and the utility savings. So that was a nice email when they came back and said, hey, we got the updated stuff. We wanted to share it with you before you guys started running it. So
yeah, that's amazing. Just things you don't even think about,
Yeah.
So, and then our maintenance guys not even realize, some of the compressors were out. I mean,
Yep.
still working.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay, so at the end of these, I ask everybody kind of the same 3 questions. So it doesn't have to be a long answer. It's kind of a rapid fire thing. So what does your family or parents or whatever say that you do for a living?
Ooh, I'm not really sure they know exactly what I do. My wife likes to summarize it as I solve problems for a living and make sure things work the way that they're supposed to. So,
That's perfect.
around my house, I'm known as the problem solver, and something's wrong, I'm the first one they come to. So it's something I enjoy doing. So yeah, that's how
Very
they'd
good.
summarize that.
Yeah, that's a good one. So when do you get your best work done in a work day? Are you like a morning person, afternoon person?
Yeah, I like mornings. It tends to be a little calmer. I can really focus on things and get it done. Yeah, I like mornings or after my kids go to bed. If I got stuff I got to do, I'll truck through it then. And but
Yep.
mornings I tend to have the clearest mind and tend to get the most done.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think what you'll find is that's what I used to do. And now that the kids are gone, I'm too tired by that time of night to do anything. It's got to be done by like 6 or 7, or I'm not doing it anymore. So,
Right.
okay, last question. So I move back and forth a lot between using a paper-based planner or digital. So right now I'm like fully digital. I think I found a great system, but what do you like to use?
Like you, I tend to flip back and forth, and something gets a little stale, I try to change it up a little bit. For our department, we tend to use the digital base. So everybody has their own, but then they tie into what our group does as a team. But I still have, some of my own little small stuff that's just quick check boxes. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, I go the hybrid route to answer your question.
You guys use OneNote, or what do you guys use as a team?
We use we use Teams, which ties in OneNote and the planner and all that. So we've kind of
Oh, yeah.
developed that out with our team because a lot of us are remote. If the guy's out on a project site, we can still assign tasks and check in, and so it
Yeah.
allows us to collectively have an idea where everybody's at and resources that are available and things like that.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, hey, give us the pitch on McCown Gordon.
McCown Gordon, having been on both sides of the commissioning, and the engineering side, McCown has always been fantastic to work with. They are problem solvers, and they like to come at things very holistically. It's let's pull all the different heads in to solve the problem. There's not finger pointing or any of that. And that's what I really love about it, and the integrity and the relationships are very, very important. And, they tend to really leverage those. And they tend to do what they say they're gonna do. So
Yep.
yeah, we build better buildings.
Well, and having worked with McCown Gordon, I would agree. You guys are a great team. And we used, I mean, you guys worked in a construction manager at risk, delivery model, and it was really successful for us. So, well, Jereme, thanks so much for joining us today. You okay if people reach out to you if they have any questions or anything like that? And what's the best way
Yeah.
for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Best way to get a hold of me would be, probably my email, jnollett, Nollett at mccown-gordon.com, or, just reach out to our office and, we'll get you in touch with me. So.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think everyone's going to get a lot of value out of this. I know I understand it even more than I did before, which I actually understand it a lot more than I did before. So good job. And I think everyone will get a lot of value out of this episode. And I appreciate you spending the time with us.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.